Fun fact, did you know that this movie, along with Gremlins, which was released the same year, led to the invention of the PG-13 rating? Yeah, after these movies came out, the MPAA was like, those were a little too dark to be just PG. Steven Spielberg was like, alright, well, I don't think they should have been rated R, so how about a brand new rating? And thus, PG-13 was invented. There's your trivia for the day. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Alright, so Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is the second Indiana Jones movie. It was released in 1984, so 1 year after Return of the Jedi. Yes, in case you missed it, I'm talking about the Indiana Jones movies because we have a new one coming out in June. So Temple of Doom takes place in the year 1935, which would actually place it before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So yeah, it's actually a prequel. So in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, after a brief little skirmish in China, Indiana Jones finds himself in the jungles of India, along with his little kid sidekick Short Round and an American singer named Willie Scott. They come across this really poor village. They're like, you gotta help us. These bad guys have stolen our sacred stone. And so Indy, Short Round, and Willie, they venture to the Pankot Palace, where they find the Temple of Doom, which houses this evil cult. They believe their god is supreme and they're gonna take over the world. Alright, let's talk about the movie. Honestly speaking, watching this last night, I was like, this is a step down from the first one. Like I said, I'm not super nostalgically attached to this series. I've seen the movies, just not too many times. So I'm watching them now with kinda newish eyes. And I will say that Temple of Doom is not nearly as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark. I didn't hate this one, I didn't really love it either though. Honestly, I'm kind of neutral on it. There are things I like about it and things I don't like about it. First off, Indiana Jones, once again played by Harrison Ford, he's as badass as ever. There's nothing really too different about his character here. The other characters though, okay. First off, Short Round. I really like Short Round, or Shorty as Indy calls him. He's played by a young Ki Hai Kwan, who just won the Golden Globe for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Awesome speech, by the way. But he's a kid in this movie. His acting is not necessarily the best, but his lines are really funny. The scene early on where they're playing poker by the campfire, and they're accusing each other of cheating, that made me laugh out loud. But aside from having the funniest moments in the film, he's also actually a useful character. He does help Indy out in this whole endeavor. In fact, he really comes through later on in the movie. Like, I will say, without Short Round, this movie would not have a good ending. That is to say, things would not have ended well for the good guys. So go Short Round. And then there is Willie Scott, played by Kate Capshaw, and yeah, I will say, this is where Steven Spielberg actually met his wife. The two of them have been married ever since. They're still married to this day. Good for them. Doesn't change the fact that Willie Scott is a horrible character. I hated her in this movie, straight up. Cause she bitches and whines the entire time she's there. She hates this adventure she's on. And unlike Short Round, she is actually useless. Throughout the entire movie, I was like, why are you here? Why are you a love interest? She and Indy have a kind of sexual tension, which, okay, fine. Well, actually, no. I wasn't really buying it at all. Their chemistry wasn't nearly as good as it was in the first movie with Karen Allen. The only useful thing that Willie does in this movie is later on during the minecart chase, she punches a guy. Okay. Right there, I was like, okay, so you did do something. That's the one useful thing you did in this entire movie. Other than that, worst character in the series I've seen so far. So she is a big minus point for this movie. That being said though, this film does still have its fun adventure. But if I'm comparing it to Raiders of the Lost Ark, in that film we went from location to location. I mean, we were in Cairo most of the time, but there were more places in Cairo that we went to. In this film, we're in this one temple for most of the movie. Which is interesting though, because when we first get to the temple, I was like, wait, are we halfway through this film already? I'll give this movie that, it's paced pretty well. The build-up is pretty solid, but once we get to the temple, we are there for the rest of the movie. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, I'm just stating it here. I will say there is the scene where we have that room full of huge bugs, and you know how Indy doesn't like snakes, he has a phobia of them? Well, that's how I am with big bugs. I can't. So this was the scene where I was like, I would never ever go in there, cause, ugh. In fact, this one scene had me saying nope to my screen more times than the movie Nope. Which means the movie's really effective in that right, especially in that scene. And this probably is the most violent movie of the Indiana Jones series. Cause the thing about this cult, this thuggy cult, is that they worship their Kali Ma god with human sacrifices. They'll have someone in a cage, and their leader, Molly Ram, will literally reach inside their chest and pull out their heart. I remember being a kid and watching that and being like, I have to shield my eyes, I can't take that yet. Although honestly speaking, knowing that it was just a dummy and there's no blood really in that scene, I probably would have been able to take it. Still though, the concept of ripping out someone's heart like that, just ugh. That is pretty dark. I can see how this led to the invention of PG-13, absolutely. Cause that's some pretty messed up shit. Watching it now though, I was like, that's pretty cool. I will give props to this movie for pulling off the tension pretty well. There are scenes where you're like, oh, I don't know if they're gonna make it out alive. Which is weird since this takes place before Raiders. But still, the film did pull that off with the atmosphere and tone and the buildup of the music. The bad guys are just bad, they're enslaving kids. That's never good. The centerpiece action scene in this movie is this big minecart chase, which is awesome. This scene is really exciting. They're going throughout this whole track like Minecraft and shit. I can't believe I just said that, but yeah. But it is really cool. The bad guys are shooting at them. They're going through these caves and tunnels and there's lava down below. You get the feeling this is probably what led to the most inspiration for the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland, Temple of the Forbidden Eye, which is my favorite ride at Disneyland, by the way. Because for a lot of it, it is kind of similar, except you're in a Jeep, but you're going throughout these tunnels and it's bumpy. It's super fun, just like this action scene. Now, as for the music in this film, of course, John Williams came back and he brought his Raiders March with him. Some themes from the first one, they're not back in this one, like the love theme. I guess that was specifically for Marion. There's a new love theme for this one with Willie, and there's new music involving this whole thuggy cult. It's fine, it's functional in the movie. I just don't think it's as memorable as the music in Raiders. And really, that's Temple of Doom in a nutshell. I feel like since Raiders did so well, this was the sequel that just had to be made, you know? It's a step down from the first one, it's not nearly as good or probably not nearly as memorable. I mean, people do still regard it as a classic, it being part of the original Indiana Jones trilogy. But if I had to guess, this is probably going to go down as being my least favorite of the three. I hate Willie Scott with a passion. In fact, I probably wouldn't have minded if she did end up getting sacrificed to Kali. But Indy's still a badass. I love Short Round, I love the action, that minecart chase, and all the other action scenes as well. It's simpler than the first movie. Like I said, I don't love this one, I don't hate it. I am neutral on it, and besides, if I were to make a prediction, it's probably not going to end up being my least favorite of all of the Indy movies so far. So, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Have you seen it? What are your thoughts on it? And where does it rank among all the Indy films for you? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, thank you for subscribing. Peace!